thank you all for joining us today. I am Beth Potts, the Associate Director of Diocesan Relations for the National Catholic Partnership on Disability. We are excited to have you with us on this International Day of Persons with Disabilities, which falls on December 3rd every year, and for our Where Faith and Disability Meet panel discussion that is focused on veterans. I'm going to introduce our panel in just a moment, but before we begin, I want to share some information about some upcoming events. Next Thursday, we have our Advent retreat that is specifically for people with chronic illness or chronic disabilities and their caregivers. And we also, in February and in March, we are going to be sharing results of a survey that we did earlier this year that was looking at parish disability awareness and practices. So we invite you to come back and join us there and find out what we learned about what parishes are doing and know or think about disability and their practices regarding disability. If you're a diocesan leader, we invite you to join us on February 12th, where the results are really going to be tailored for you. And then anyone else is welcome to join us on March 12th. And we would love to see all of you in August at our conference. We will be in Salt Lake City for a Pilgrims of Hope conference. And we would also love to see proposals to present from folks involved today. And our website for the conference should be up the end of this week or early next week. So think about it, and we would love to see you. Finally, an exciting announcement about a new course we have available on sensory-friendly masses. We have a short course, but this one is longer and goes much more in depth and has some beautiful resources that will really help you put sensory-friendly mass into use from the bottom up. And we also have a new bundle of our 2 parish advocate courses, putting those together for you at a special price so that you have basic information. And then you also have the in-depth, this is how step by step to actually start a parish advocate program in your area. And so that is kind of our news at the moment from the National Catholic Partnership on Disability. And if you will join me, we will begin in prayer. The italicized, bolded part, if you would join me on those pieces, I would appreciate that. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen.
Amen.
God of all people, you have made us in your image, delighting in your creation. Help us to see and receive each person as a beloved and unique part of your body. We are all parts
of the body
of Christ. You desire all people to use their gifts to enrich the world around them. Help us to celebrate and support the participation and leadership of persons with disabilities in our communities. We are all parts of the body of Christ. You give and sustain life, opening ways of thinking and doing that allow all to grow. Help us to be inclusive and welcoming persons with disabilities as a vital part of us. We are all part of the body of Christ. We ask this through Christ, who lives within us and calls us all to fullness of life.
Amen.
Amen.
And this prayer came from the Australia Catholic Bishops' Conference, and they created it in recognition of this International Day of People with Disabilities several years ago. But I think that it's beautiful and a beautiful way to begin our time together. So I am honored to have with us today 3 veterans whose lives have been molded by their time and experiences during their service. We have Air Force veteran Kathy Haley and Army veterans Deacon Josh Klickman and Sam Paul Vorapanich. I'm going to let Deacon Josh and Sam Paul tell you a bit about themselves. But first, Kathy asked me to give you her background. As with many of us, it's hard for her to talk about herself. And so she asked me to go ahead and do that for her. Kathy was raised Catholic and attended Catholic school through college, earning a BA in English from Mount St. Mary's College in Los Angeles. After graduation, she joined the Air Force as a second lieutenant and was stationed at the 5th Fighter Interceptor Squadron as an avionics maintenance officer. She was the squadron's first female officer. She met her husband, Paul, in the Catholic chapel program, playing guitar for masses. And she was very active in her church in Minot, North Dakota.
Why not?
I knew I was going to mispronounce that. But she was forced to leave the church when the pastor demanded she quit her job as a counselor at a safe house in order to remain in the Catholic Church. So she was asked to give up something that she felt was kind of core to her being. So instead, she became United Methodist for a while, and she became a licensed professional counselor. She earned master's and doctorate degrees in divinity and was ordained an elder in 2001. She served as a chaplain and a pastor for 16 years, and then God called her back to the Catholic Church. Kathy is rated as 100% complete and permanent disabled due to PTSD, due to military sexual trauma, traumatic brain injury, and service-connected back injury that has resulted in the fusion of 22 of her vertebrae. She has a service dog, Hesed. I got close. I got close.
You got very close.
I got close. A German Shepherd dog, and spends her time counseling veterans with PTSD and TBIs and helping them to train their service dogs. We will hear directly from Kathy in a little bit. But first, let's hear about our other panelist. Sam Paul?
All right, thank you very much, Elizabeth. As Elizabeth said, my name is Sam Paul Vorapanich. I'm a recently retired first sergeant from the Army after serving 21 years of active duty service, multiple combat deployments throughout the entire world, basically. Been a busy time, but very, very meaningful because being able to lead military training exercises as well as missions and to include some type of missionary work, some type of philanthropic events with it was very fulfilling, and it helped to bring, you know, the light of Christ in addition to the military forces and support to many of these countries that are in dire need for it. I am the firstborn of my family in the United States. My parents are refugees from the Vietnam War. And so my father was a South Vietnamese citizen recruited into the U.S. Marines because he was trilingual and made him the perfect candidate to be a force recon interrogator. And then my mother was one of the boat people who escaped and fled the tyranny and oppression from the communism by way of a very tiny vessel, and made her way eventually to a refugee camp in Thailand. And so fast forward, they were sponsored over. My mother was sponsored over by the church. My father was brought over by the military and given amnesty. And so he worked diligently to bring my mother and the rest of the family, his father, all my aunts and uncles over, because they were all fighting as militias or for the South Vietnamese government, and were known as, you know, enemies of the state to the communist government that had taken over. So our family were Buddhists and converted over to Catholicism, and have been very devout Catholics, and I kind of led my pathway into the military, one of wanting to repay that debt to the United States, the country that gave us freedom and opportunity. So, and I'm glad to be here with all of you. I am also fully permanent and disabled, and so I use the ability of recognizing my disability to help others, especially when it comes to PTSD and moral injury, which is a trend that we're seeing. We're seeing much less of the physical wounds, but we find a much larger need to care for the mental, spiritual wounds, and those are ones that continuously need care, and I think we're in a great position to do so.
Would you mind just defining for those who don't know what the moral injury piece is, what you were referencing?
Yeah, so we are all different. We're individual souls that were created by the Lord, but the what made our moral character, our influences throughout our life, our moral hierarchy. So the spiritual leaders from our church, from our families, from our society, the laws that govern our lands, our countries, and whatnot. And that's what makes us who we are, and that what builds us, our moral characters. And then in the cloud of warfare, sometimes we're either ordered to, or we have to make the decisions, the command decisions to order others, or we witness atrocities that go against our moral values. And when that goes against our moral values, it compromises our moral compass, and that's not something that can be fixed with pharmaceuticals and just counseling. That's something that somebody that has moral character or moral authority has to help. And in our church, we know that we are a sacramental church, and these many of these sacraments and these practices help to help bring us to that healing path, if not heal us of it in themselves. So
Thank you so much. I just knew that we probably had some folks who didn't know exactly what we meant by that, so thank you.
definitely.
Um, so I'm gonna ask Deacon Josh to introduce himself next, but I'm also going to say that unknowingly, these 2 know each other. Like, I asked both of them to come to this panel, and I had no idea that they have known each other for decades, right?
Yes, indeed.
And actually served together. So, Deacon Josh, welcome. Please tell us about yourself.
Yeah, so it's good to see San Paul. I saw the name. I was like, there can't be too many San Pauls. But yeah, we've been together for a while. So a little bit about myself. On the faith background, or is that the next question? Because how did that lead to me joining the military? I'll,
The
I'll
you can answer both of those
I'll
at the
I'll
same
blend them
time
in.
if you
Yeah, it
want.
might
That's
be
fine.
easier. So let me see. I grew up in the 70s and 80s in Portland, Oregon. I wasn't Catholic, so my faith background was really atheistic. Happy childhood though. Very military. I loved hearing what San Paul had to say about his parents. But my mom and my dad and my sister were all in the army, so I feel like Forrest Gump. When my grandpa was in the army, my great grandpa. I mean, you can't find too many people in my family who weren't military. My dad and my uncle were Vietnam vets, so that played a big influence, I think, on me. And so I always knew I was going to join the army. Um, I love sports, and that kind of led me to go into the infantry. My dad told me if you like being in shape, you ought to consider being infantry or special forces. And my dad was in the security agency, and so was my mom was actually security agency as well. So they were in deep space intercept and things like that. Anyway, so I joined in '95. I was in the infantry, and then I went into special forces. And in that actually, so right before I joined the military, my friends from sports, they're great Christian Assembly of God types. Did not know what a Catholic was at that point in my life, but I always like to rub them the wrong way with religion, so I read the Bible just to upset them, but. I think God and their prayers had the upper hand, obviously. I became a born again Christian. So when I came in the military, that's what my dog said. My dog tag said. But over a couple years, I got exposed to the Roman Catholic Church and came into the fullness of the faith in 2002. I made my profession of faith. I was actually baptized as a baby, which is part of the longer story, which I'll save. Anyway, so that I joined the military, I was in special forces. That's how San Paul and I kept running into each other through our time in the special operations community. I was a weapons sergeant. A lot of people still can't. Again, they when they see me, they say, "Oh, where were you a chaplain at?" I'm like, "No, I wasn't a chaplain. I didn't become a deacon until a couple years after I retired." But I retired in 2019 here on Fort Bragg. 100% disabled. Got a little bit of introduction to the disability life anyway. My wife and I had a daughter who was very premature, and so I've lived around that community as well, finding the different abilities and contributions. And then they always say disability is something that, if you live long enough, you're going to find yourself encountering that. So I've always looked for, with my daughter, because she walks with forearm crutches, I'm always looking for the path, the ramp or whatever. But now, now that sometimes me as, I'm disabled from my toes to my neck, it's kind of a different part every month or something that's bothering me in a different way. And then yeah, pretty big chunk of post-traumatic stress as well, serving in Iraq and Afghanistan as a weapons sergeant. So 2019, I retired. I got my master's in theology my last couple years in from Franciscan University, and got a job working for the Roman Catholic Church. So now I'm the Human Life and Dignity Coordinator for the Diocese of Raleigh. And I think that's going to lead into some of that healing portion I'll talk about later. And I was ordained a few years after that. And so now I live in Fayetteville, North Carolina, and I serve throughout the entire eastern half of North Carolina, helping parishes with their life and dignity ministry. So that's everything from legal defense of the unborn, disability is one of those areas as well, euthanasia. There's about 50 different topics, immigration, environment, anything you could think of that's sort of political, but also our mission as Catholics to be involved with making the world a better place. So that's my current my current job, and I live here in Fayetteville. My wife and 6 kids.
Okay, fabulous. Yeah, we went kind of all over the place, which is good, and wonderful. So I'm gonna kind of skip ahead a little bit to over what was going to be our next topic. And Deacon Josh, so you mentioned that you were not Catholic and kind of grew into that as you were in the service and all of that. Can you talk to us about how your vocation helps you deal with the realities of your disability right now?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. So, like, in the height of my struggling with post-traumatic stress disorder and substance abuse and such, probably about 15 years ago, really trying to find ways through the different opportunities they offer in the military, counseling and stuff like that. I really found that kind of mind, body, soul connection, and my faith played a huge part in that. Obviously, trying to figure out how to get the healing, how to get some morning meditation, whatever they would have called that, through the advice of counselors. But I kept running against the faith. And so that really kind of drove my faith life. And then as the physical disabilities started creeping in as well, I found that I needed to continue to move. I wrote an article probably about 2, 3 years ago, sort of an opinion piece on what it's like to have those physical disabilities. And I found that if I don't get up and move, if I don't get out and exercise, things just don't work. So actually, I just want to. I think it was a great analogy that somebody had told me. I had a friend that was in the 160th Special Operations Aviation, and people remember the raid to get Osama bin Laden. Well, what he had told me was one of the helicopters was like they knew it was never going to be able to take off again because it was damaged somehow, but it could continue to fly. And I don't understand helicopters; that doesn't make sense to me. But somehow they knew the whole way in that, hey, guys, this helicopter is working now, but it's not going to work on our way out. So they had to they were planning their cross load, which of course they already planned for. But I was fascinated by the story of like, what is that like to be that disabled helicopter that that knew once it stopped, it was never getting back up. And I think that's kind of what life feels like as a disabled veteran. So being active with the faith life really helps. And then giving back is really key. 12-step programs talk about that sort of reliance. Once you stop substance abuse, now what? You can't just live for not doing something. You have to live for doing something, which is helping other people. And so yeah, over the past 10, 15 years, I started getting more involved with different things from, feeding the homeless, feeding the hungry, working with migrants and refugees. Um, and then that kind of just put me into a position where I was doing more work with the church, which led to me pursuing a degree in theology to be when people would ask me questions, I wanted to be a little a little smarter about like, well, I don't know, is it Jesus? How do I explain to people that Jesus is God? I don't know. That's a good question. I just know it's true. So I got my degree in theology, and that got me to work in the church. And now it's just a blessing because that's what really keeps me moving throughout my day is that kind of giving back. And if I can get just one more minute on that too, Mother Teresa gave this path of holiness. There's 6 steps to it: silence, prayer, faith, love, service, peace. And this is kind of like you can see that throughout your day. So you start your day with silence, and then that silence leads you to prayer. Prayer, a real prayer with God, shows you that God is real in your life, and that leads you to a deep sense of faith. And then once you know that God loves you, you have to go out in service. I mean, you can't just sit there and say, "Well, this is great. I'm going to keep going to daily mass." You have to go and encounter people who need whatever sort of assistance, whatever sort of grace you receive from the sacraments. You have to give it to others. So that silence, prayer, faith, love, to love other people, to serve other people is step 5. And then when you get home at the end of the day after doing all that, you get a deeper sense of peace, which leads you to a deeper sense of silence, prayer, faith, love, service, peace. And so it's a pretty well known with simple path. I think she called it simple path to holiness. Is pretty well known. But I kind of did find that driving my faith life, and also healing, obviously, for the PTSD, moral wounds, as St. Paul talks about, but even for the physical, just getting up and getting off the couch and moving. So
Thank you. And that actually is
That's my service dog.
yeah, we knew that he'd make an appearance sometime, right? So St. Paul also talked to me when we chatted earlier about that importance of being a servant leader, and how kind of everything pulled into that for you. Can you talk about that development for us, from deciding you wanted to be a paratrooper to living this life of servant leadership? Oh, you are muted though.
There we go. Thank you. So I definitely believe there are no such thing as coincidences. Coincidences. There's the divine intervention, and everything's up to the Lord's plan. And so I had always known I wanted to repay the debt to my country for my family. Growing up, culturally, it's very important for us to honor our elders, honor our nation, honor our church, and so and being the eldest son, I felt that weight on my shoulders, but I was also very, I guess, a high-strung person, very fast-paced. After graduating, high school, I went straight into college. At that point, I had a couple of businesses of my own, and I was, trying to help out the family, refugee family. My parents both worked multiple jobs to help support us, and I wanted to help out from the time I was, able to do so early on. From 13, 14 years old, I'm selling candy bars at school, and and stuff and whatnot, But it was all just to help others, and it's that form of serving, as in whatever position or whatever capacity you can, and then continuing on, and then finding that next opportunity. So fast forward to, I graduated high school in '96, graduated college in '99, living a fast-paced life, and then 2001 happens, and everyone's lives changed throughout the world. And that was really my catalyst. 9/11 happened. And I remember watching it on TV, and as it's unfolding, and our great nations being attacked, and so that really helped get me off my butt and make me decide to join. Um, so that's when I started the process of reaching out to all the different branches of service to see which one I wanted to join, and what would offer me the best opportunity. But there was this commercial that I always remembered in my head. It was an old '80s "Be All You Can Be" commercial for the Army, and it showed you know th- these paratroopers pushing a jeep out of the back of a C-130, and then following it afterwards, jumping in, and then the first sergeant jumps in the jeep and then drives off with the guys with the equipment, and then soldier walks up to him, hands him a cup of coffee. He's like, "Good morning, first sergeant." He's like, "Good morning," and then the caption comes across and says, "We do more before 9 a.m. than most people do all day." And when I saw that, it embedded in my mind that being a paratrooper is what I'd always wanted to do. And so, fast forward later on, when I went to all 4 branches of service, I asked them, if they can guarantee me airborne. I guess I ended up being the perfect candidate for the recruiters in the Army, because couldn't get it in the Navy, the Air Force, or the Marines, but the Army said, "Yes, we can give it to you. You really want this?" And I was like, and then I want to be in the 82nd Airborne Division because they have a great history, a great lineage. And they said, "Oh, even more perfect because we have this job for you, and as soon as you get there, you can deploy." I was like, "Perfect. That's exactly what I want." So it all worked out, and uh, and so I got what I wanted. I got to deploy immediately as soon as I got within a week of arriving at my unit from my training path. And it was an eye opener because we had known that we were going to go in for the invasion. We knew to expect the unexpected. But as long as we started every day, in every operation, and in the name is Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, we did everything because we know the old mantra when it comes to war: there's no atheist in a foxhole. And anytime you're in combat or a tough situation arises or there's bullets whizzing over your head, no matter what you believe, you're calling out for one being, and that's God. And so, being a servant soldier at the time, a servant paratrooper, was great. I got to learn from many who had that experience, who had not only life experiences but combat experience, and then had the experience of being in multiple cultures, multiple environments. Was great because it helped me to adapt and understand. Because that when you try to embrace other cultures, you start to realize there are a lot more similarities than there are differences. And the same thing with many of the religions that we find that some become a little bit more, militaristic than others, as we've seen in recently in the global war on terrorism. But I think that it these situations allow us to make the right decisions, and as long as we make faith-based decisions, it gives us that opportunity that first off, we won't regret our decisions because we knew we made it based uh, off of the laws, the commandments that we've been taught, and those that have come before us to train us, to teach us how to make those decisions, and then those influences that have been so incumbent in our lives. And fast forward later on, we're now, just like brother Josh, a brother in arms that we met in special operations. It's a small world, but it's really, it is amazing when you cross paths because you realize there are people that you meet that you become brothers and sisters in arms forever. You have that lineage, and I'm glad that he mentioned earlier that he followed that lineage of his family like Forrest Gump, because I'm glad he didn't say Lieutenant Dan, because they had some catastrophes in their lineage going on. But we had these great opportunities where we were brothers in arms in the special operations world and the military world, but also joining the Knights. We're both members of the Fort Bragg, the St. Michael's of the Archangel Council of Fort Bragg, which is a great namesake, our patron saint of the airborne, the paratroopers, and all service members. And so I think it all just led us into these opportunities where we can make these decisions, where we're leading and molding the new generation of leaders, but also we're being examples for them. And so being a servant leader helps us to give them those decision making processes to make those decisions when their time comes. And so that way they don't have to live with those regrets of those outcomes, but they can be proud of what they did and the lives that they changed.
Thank you so much. Um, so you've heard two perspectives, and Kathy's had a little bit of a more difficult experience since coming out with greater impact of her disabilities that she gained while she was in the service. So Kathy's going to tell us about some of the typical challenges of veterans who have more severe PTSD and more severe traumatic brain injuries as well. So
Well,
Kathy,
first, I need to talk about the fact that for women especially, there is no brother in arms. You are a spot that guys can just grab a hold of you. And in my case, it was one of my instructors who raped me. and I couldn't do anything because they didn't have all of these programs that they had. And he told me, by using a knife to my throat, that if I told anybody about this, that he would ruin my career. And at that point, I was thinking of having a career. After that happened, though, I felt that, you know, I put my 4 years in and then get out, even though I come from a very patriotic family. My dad was on Guam in World War II, though we thought the Air Force would be safe because he said, don't go into the Navy, because he knew what Navy guys were like, because he had been one. Don't go into the Army, because the Army and the Marine Corps both look at women and look and see them as a mattress instead of seeing them as a fellow soldier to work with and take care of with. So it's all fine and good to talk about the brotherhood.
Very different experience overall, every part of it, right? Every
Right.
part of it.
And
So,
with myself being an officer, I was the first female officer in my squadron. There were only about 3 or 4 females in the whole squadron, and I was supposed to be in charge of them and make sure they behaved themselves. Most of them were older than I was. I was 21 going in. There are some of my NCOs had more time in service than I had alive. You know, and so I always followed up with what my dad said, you know, try to bloom where you're planted, and things, you know, will work out. But it doesn't work out when you're walking in the darkness around airplanes and you get attacked again.
Yep.
So
well, and obviously there's been long-term lasting impact, and part of that impact has impacted how you are relate to and are able to engage in your faith too. So can you tell us, I know some days it's hard for you to go to mass. What is it about the environment that triggers you and makes it hard to be in the church?
as some other veterans along with me say, it's too peoply out there. You know, I can't sit in the church with 900 people.
Mhm.
You know, and there are no small Catholic churches in the Denver area.
Yeah.
You know, there's just too many people. I have made the suggestion to my archdiocese, how about if parishes take turns one time a quarter or a month to have a mass that's just for veterans or for people that have sensory issues, to come to, where we can sit 100 pews
Yeah.
away from everybody else that is there. Uh, a number of my friends in the American Legion said they cannot go back to church, you know, because there's just too many people there.
Mhm. Yeah. And you and I talked about physical accessibility yesterday when we were talking. Talk to us about how physical accessibility is a barrier, um, especially with your service dog also.
Right. I chose to have German Shepherds as a service dog. One, because I was raised with them, but secondly, because one instance that I had was coming out off of an elevator with my service dog, and there were 3 kids there that you could tell that they were up to no good. But they took one look at my service dog and yelled, "It's a cop dog," and went running the other direction. But what the people in the church that I used to go to the visitation chapel all the time until there was a complete complaint made that dogs should not be in the visitation chapel. But from the very beginning, since I had a service dog, the Council of Bishops has said to the churches, they must accept service dogs in their in their services. None of the other religions has been that bold to state that. So, but then it all depends on who the pastor is, whether it will be enforced.
Well, or even known, right? Like people can make comments and say this is right and this is what should be happening, but that doesn't necessarily mean everybody knows it
And the
to
way
be able
most
to enforce it.
the way most Catholic churches are built, I don't know what style it is, but it's long and narrow aisles and everything. There are no spaces for people in wheelchairs. There is no spaces for people who have a German Shepherd, because they don't want them out in the aisle because of a fire hazard. I tell you, there's a fire in that building. Hesed will get me out of that building faster than any usher will.
Yeah. So tell us some of the other things that Hesed does to support you as your service animal.
One of the biggest ones, and we don't know how she does this, but I know that she picked it up from my last service dog. She tells me when I have to go to the bathroom. When I'm sitting down, my body does not recognize the connection between my head and my kidneys and bladder. So she comes and she lets me, know that there is a need, and I won't feel it until I stand up.
Yeah.
And that's something that really people don't want you just standing up in the middle of mass.
Well, that's true. Yeah.
And for the amount of time that I would have to leave, I feel like I end up missing the majority of mass anyway, so I watch it from EWTN.
Mhm. What are some other ways that Hesed helps you?
Just a matter of comfort. I don't go to malls anymore now that I've gotten so decrepit at my age of 70. But I can, if I am feeling the crowd crushing in, I can tell her to find out, and she will find the nearest way out, whether that is a door to go outside or an elevator.
That's amazing. That's not where I thought you were going when you said comfort. But that's
It's
Yeah.
comfort for us, for my
Yeah.
fellow veterans who were in combat with their
Mhm.
service dogs. They can feel like they're back in combat.
Mhm.
They look at their dog, and if their dog is not bothered, then they can know that they can relax because the dog is not bothered. So
Yeah.
therefore, they can ground themselves. There's nothing like feeling nervous, and all you have to do is put your hand down to rest it in their fur, and it automatically calms you down. And not everybody wants a big dog. Uh, I I have friends in our American Legion motorcycle club, and they have these little Yorkshire Terriers that they just sit in the top of their jacket, and
Mhm.
they're alerting them to low sugar.
Yep.
Because a lot of vets come out with damage of pancreases and everything if they, and so the dog, there's just too much serious. I've got my
That's okay. There are so many different things that the
stereotyping.
dog can do. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, but the stereotyping, I walk into a store with Hesed, and they accept her as a service dog.
Mhm.
Somebody walks into the store with a pit bull or Yorkshire Terrier, and not every dog is there to do physical things for you.
Yeah. Yeah. we definitely have a long way to go on education of that to the greater world.
Well, that's what,
Um,
a few years ago, I started doing talks for businesses in Colorado. You know, what can services ask for? What, you know, what what do we expect from the team? Because there are rules and regulations, and a lot of people just like to take advantage of it. Well, I want my dog with me 24 hours too.
yeah, which is not the same. Not
No,
the same. Yeah. Well, let's go ahead and open it up and see what questions our attendees might have for you all. Does anyone have questions? Give it a few seconds, and if not, of course, I have more I can ask. Um, I was very lucky to be able to chat with all of these folks for a while individually to know what we wanted to make sure to talk about today. And um, I enjoy learning about veterans and veteran situations, and there's always more to learn. Always more to learn. Um, so yes, Kathy, go ahead.
yes, that some other people are disabled have the same problem. If you meet a team with a service dog, talk to the person, not to the dog. You know, it's like people who have caregivers, the people all talk to the caregiver is because they're the one pushing the wheelchair instead of talking to the person who's sitting in the chair.
Yeah.
Josh, you seem to have had that.
Well, yeah, and especially, well, my daughter Jessica, I mean, people, ask what's wrong with her or whatever, and it's like,
Mm.
if she could talk, if you have any questions, you could ask her always. But yeah, I get that.
How old is she?
Jessica now she's about 25. So,
Okay.
oh wait,
So
yeah,
definitely.
muted. Oh
Definitely.
yeah, oh yeah. I
Yeah.
mean,
I was picturing like a 6-year-old.
no, but
Okay.
even back then, but yeah, we get that a lot.
Yeah, but disabilities aside, she has a strong mind and a strong soul.
Mhm.
She was a cheerleader, if I'm not
Mhm.
mistaken, right,
Yep,
Josh? For
yep,
competitive for many years. So,
yep. Yeah, she's
and
still active. Yeah.
yeah, that's awesome. And Doc Haley, I truly understand what you say, especially when it comes to service animals. For a period of time, I was a dog handler. And even while deployed, we kept our dogs with us constantly because it wasn't a piece of equipment on a hand receipt; it was a member of our team, right?
Right.
And so I was allowed to bring Bodie, where I was allowed to bring her into the chapel. They actually had a spot for her,
And
and
she
then
even outranked you.
that's right, she does, she does, and so. And then if there were times where, we're constantly on mission and the missions happen at any odd hour of the day. And so we were blessed that, we had chaplains that were able to, if we missed mass, they were still able to be Eucharistic ministers and deliver to us, especially when we come from some really drastic moments. When we return from a mission that we may have had casualties or losses, or those that are injured. We want to have the sacraments readily available if we can. And so, yeah, I hope that that's something that they're able to assist with at your diocese and your parish, because I do see where we have a need for that, especially in the Catholic faith. Right, Constantine converted the entire Roman Empire, that's East and West, into a nation. This is a nation at war, a nation of warriors, which is how we had developed the just war theory. Because when it's a nation at war and you are a now Holy Roman Empire. You have to protect the warriors. You have to care for them, and there are a lot of rituals that they practice that some areas still practice. They used to say, either you'll come home carrying your shield or on it. Well, they carried their shields home and their swords. They did not step into the towns until the priest came out and blessed them and forgave them of their sins, and then welcomed and embraced them back into the church. And it's where I think it's very important to maintain many of these practices, and then raise the awareness of it. A strong part of the healing path is, what I believe is the pilgrimage, right? And we see that the vicar himself has named a new Jubilee year offset from the usual 25-year cycle. And it is a year of pilgrimage. Even the mascot, Luce, is a pilgrim. And so, and again, I don't believe in coincidences, just divine intervention. The theme that we have for our pilgrimage, the Warrior to Lourdes pilgrims, that the Knights of Columbus sponsors and is held by the Archdiocese for the Military Service, is Military Pilgrims of Hope, which is the same theme for your retreat in Salt Lake City in August, and is the same theme that the Vatican proclaimed for the Jubilee year. And I believe that pilgrimage is important. We walk that path together, whether it's walking, limping, being pushed, because we are a communal people. We need to heal as a community, and we need to heal with our church. And I believe opportunities like this, whether it is any of the Jubilee pilgrimages, those who participate in the Warrior to Lourdes pilgrimage, going on retreat in Salt Lake City, all of it is creating emotion. And these motions that we make moving towards it create that emotion, and is how we're able to heal together. So.
So I was going to ask another question, but we have one in the chat. It says, earlier today, I attended a ceremony at the Tallahassee National Cemetery for a veteran who died without family. It was heartbreaking as he died in a house fire while living alone. I feel there's a need to assist senior veterans living with disabilities or transportation limitations. Is there a program you can recommend to assist senior veterans with varying degrees of disabilities that we could implement at the local level? Do you all know of anything?
I don't know of any specific programs. However, I do encourage them to reach out if there's a local Knights of Columbus parish. Our 4 pillars, the 4th degrees pillar is based off of patriotism. And so they would like to help out. Unfortunately, there's not always a means of finding those resources or finding where the help is needed. And if they reach out to a local Knights of Columbus Parish Council, or any of the military councils, or here at Knights of Columbus headquarters, someone should be able to answer and push them in the right direction if there are no specific programs that we can name in those areas. I'm sure there are council and council members that are willing to help out.
But have you noticed you're all talking in terms of male?
Well,
Reach
the
out.
men sometimes will help women too.
You can't join the Knights of Columbus.
You can't join, but in terms of the service, and I would say asking the parish period.
That has been a major problem. The women finally have broken through into the American Legion and the VFW and everything, but there's nothing for the church that you can lead them to becoming a deacon, leading Bible studies, things like that. I tried to lead a Bible study and was told I was too close to still being a Methodist to do that. The Bible doesn't change.
Agreed. So there are some programs, military installations. I see them because the military spouses, especially the wives, are quite engaged with the communities there. So we have CWAC, which is Catholic Women of the Church. And then we also have the Columbiates in some areas that are still operating, and those welcome the ladies of the parish, and they have programs such as Bible studies, and hopefully that there are more and that they're growing. And I hope we're able to find those organizations and advertise their abilities.
And I cannot recall the name of it, but there is a specific Catholic veterans group that's very active, and I am 90% sure that there are male and female members, because I saw one at a local parish, and there were both men and women that were involved.
You know, where it is funny, you might think this group of people would be more closed in, but if you are anywhere close to a Native American reservation, they
Mhm.
are very proud of their female soldiers, and they have parades and give them quilts and everything else like that. They don't make a difference between if you're a male veteran or a female veteran. Because
Mhm.
as a female, I'm still being asked, why in the hell would you do that?
You're a
My
warrior, Doc. You're a
Yeah,
warrior.
we when we were doing certificates and thanks as part of the anniversary of the Vietnam War, we gave my mother-in-law, who served in the Air Force, a certificate, and she broke down crying, said it was literally the first time she'd been thanked for her service.
Yes,
Um,
yeah,
and
Vietnam was my war.
yes,
Mhm.
and we've come a little ways from that, but for sure, female and shorter time serving, less likely.
Yeah.
So one of the things that you all kind of hit on a little bit, and I think would be a great kind of wrap up question, if no one else has other questions, is just what are some things you think that the church could do to be more friendly, helpful, welcoming, and helping with that healing for our veterans, and especially if it's not somewhere where you've got a super high population of veterans, but where you've got maybe a handful of people that you know about, if that, maybe two, you know?
Yeah, that's real tough because I live in Fayetteville, so and I work at two parishes, and they're both probably somewhere around 90% military, which is a bit of a gift for me to serve kind of as a chaplain for people that doing funerals and such. I couldn't have been a chaplain because I couldn't have been a priest, right? But now I get to serve as a bit of a chaplain as a deacon. I think something Dr. Haley, it was really nice to hear you talk earlier to share, and I think that's probably part of what we need to do is just listen as a diocesan official, hearing people say, I have a respiratory, challenge. And so I don't want to be in a crowded church. I'd like to go, as you mentioned earlier, doctor, that like having a 7 a.m. mass where there's like 20 people would be great and making sure that we're there in the fresh air. I also share with you that same kind of anxiety. Sometimes it hits me and I turn red where all of a sudden I'm like, where did that come from? But it's just being in a crowded place waiting for something to blow up and everybody to die
But
or something like that. So
every thing that you hear.
right. Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I know I need to do a little bit more self-care, but I think listening is real key. But I couldn't really speak to the other piece to that. I did want to say too that yeah, the Knights of Columbus, also the National Council of Catholic Women, there are about a half a dozen women auxiliary type organizations that do a lot of service work, Bible studies, and open up to welcoming women. But I do think that's important. What you said, Beth, was that especially in this community, my heart goes out big time to people that retire and move to somewhere where there's not, it's not Fayetteville, North Carolina, where they're, one of the few veterans around. And I just think parishes need to be, pastors need to be listening, and the parish staff need to be listening so they can accommodate and do make those extra efforts to do things like having masses at different times with smaller groups, not just for the veteran population, but other people with different types of abilities or different limitations,
Right.
so they could attend mass and receive the sacraments.
And location can be key. If my family had moved down to Colorado Springs instead of Denver, I would be flooded
Yeah.
with
Yes. Yes.
people bringing casseroles to me and coming and visiting me and everything. But instead, I'm up in the woke Denver, you know, who's still trying to decide whether I actually did kill somebody. But I think if you, I mean, I'm real close to a base. Buckley Base Space Force is right here, but having been involved with Buckley before, we have to teach the bases too to take care of the veterans, because we have so many veterans that the civilians don't have enough time to see all of theirs. But if the church community would, you know,
Yeah.
Yeah, other churches do a great job too. The Volunteers of America, which is basically a church Salvation Army. So I think as
Right.
Catholics, we need to look at that and say that service to our military, and actually, St. Paul was hitting on this earlier too. If we don't take care of our veterans, our culture is just going to continue to go downhill. So taking care of veterans is,
Yeah.
is one of the keys. And so churches of all different churches need to understand that and make that part of their thing. You know, Meals on Wheels or whatever charities they do, they also need to remember the veteran population.
Yeah, and I think outreach is key, regardless of what environment you're in. We know in the heavily saturated environments where the percentage of military veterans are high, it's prevalent on their minds. But then you get out to the rural areas, or you get out to the difference between, like you said, Doc, Colorado Springs and then Denver are day and night.
Right.
And I've been out there. I can see it in both secular and the ecumenical societies. But I think outreach is key, and it needs to start with the pastor, the parish advisory council, because I know right now their mindset is we need to do more with less. Because we do have a shortage of leaders in the church. But I think that motion creates emotion, and then that compounds on it. If we have an outreach program, let's say not just for veterans, but yes to veterans, reach out to those you haven't seen for a while, just see how they're doing, right? Because we have that plague of the number 22 veteran suicides every single
Yes.
day, and it surged up to 26 during the height of GWOT, and luckily it's come down. And I don't know if that's because it may not be reported and it's still at that number, or we're just not as fine-tuned to it as we used to be, and sensory, overload. But if we reach out to them, that engages our organizations at the church, whether it's the Knights of Columbus, Seawalk, or other organizations, prayer groups, that would just reach out to them and then start reaching out to others. And then you engage these people, and then it gets them more active in the church. It gets more people wanting to do things, to participate. And I think that would help out the church as a whole, because not only do you have the leadership of the church engaged, now you have the church militant, every single parishioner there that's helping out. And then they can start coming up with these more creative, ways of celebrating our faith, bringing our service pets and our service animals in, which we used to have the blessing of the pets,
Oh, yeah.
blessing of service animals, and having it more often, because they are doing work day in and day out for us.
Yes. Yes.
And
I love coming to a head with that idea, because it's a lot of the same things that we talk about with so many other areas. We need to know each other, and we need to reach out to feed each other and to help each other. It is 2:00, so we are going to end, but I want to end by thanking the three of you and any other veterans who are with us today for your service, heartily. And thank you very much. And thank you for sharing this super, super, super important information, because we do need to listen. So anyone who will talk, we will listen to. Thank you very much.
Thank you.